Glenn Beck has been a broadcasting phenomenon since he left HLN to join Fox News more than 2 years ago. But while liberal commentators have long denounced the television and radio star, the right has been mostly quiet until now. Some conservative pundits have been raising their voices in challenging Beck.
I've been telling conservatives for about 2 years that this guy is bad for the movement. This guy is losing it before our eyes. He's bad for the conservative movement. He's bad for the Republican Party. He's bad for Fox News. Even guys over at Fox News have to start thinking, this can't last. He's out of control.
Weekly Standard editor Bill Kristol says when Glenn Beck rants about the caliphate taking over the Middle East from Morocco to the Philippines and invents the connections between caliphate promoters and the American left, he brings to mind no one so much as Robert Welch and the John Birch Society. He's marginalizing himself, just as his predecessors did back in the early 1960s. In commentary, Pete Wenner says Glenn Beck has become the most disturbing personality on cable television. One cannot watch him for any length of time without being struck by his affinity for conspiracies and for portraying himself as the great decoder of events. So at a time when Beck's ratings are dropping, is his own side starting to turn against him? Joining us now, Jennifer Rubin, blogger for The Washington Post, whose column is called The Right Turn, and David Frum, editor of frontforum.com and a former assistant to George W. Bush. Jennifer Rubin, you've called what Glenn Beck has to say a spasm of bile, and you write, conservatives should disassociate themselves from his brand of rhetoric. Why?
Because I think, as some of your other commentators mentioned, he is bad for the Republican Party and for the conservative movement more generally. He is not advancing arguments. He's advancing, I think, ad hominem attacks, as he did against Bill Kristol. I think he's advancing a kooky brand of conspiracy theory. And I think at a time when conservatives and Republicans specifically are making the argument that they should be taken seriously, that they are fit to govern, he's a bad image for the party, even though it's unfair in some regard to have him labeled as a representative or the face of the Republican Party.
David Frum, you've been taking on Beck for some time now, but you haven't had much company on the right until very recently. Why is that?
Well, it's safer now. But I welcome all the reinforcements. I'm glad to have them.
Why is it safer?
Because he is on the downward slope, because he is losing his own audience, because the American public, in its good sense, is showing that they're prepared to listen to anything for 6 or 7 months. But as Charlie Sheen will discover, every show gets old unless it's backed by some core of integrity. The question, here are a couple of questions, though, I'd like to contemplate. The first is, why was Glenn Beck successful in the first place? And the answer is, he was at least in his crazy way offering an explanation of what had happened to the American economy and why this recession has been so powerful. And I wrap that in all kinds of pretend information and paranoid theory, but it was an answer. And that is something that has been largely absent from a lot of the discussion, especially on the conservative side, where the whole question of what happened to the economy in October of 2008 is an uncomfortable one because there was a Republican president in October of 2008.
We'll come back to your questions because I want to play a little bit for our viewers of what Beck has had to say recently, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
We have a president who apparently loves instability and revolution. There are three powers that you will see really emerge. One, a Muslim caliphate that controls the Mideast and parts of Europe. The real answer is the Nazis were using early American progressive tactics. And that's not my opinion, that's historic fact.
Reformed rabbis are generally political in nature. It's almost like Islam, radicalized Islam in a way to where it is just, radicalized Islam is less about religion than it is about politics. When you look at the Reformed Judaism, it is more about politics.
Now, Beck did apologize for those last comments about Reform Judaism, and I should mention that we reached out to a couple conservatives we thought might defend Glenn Beck, but they were not able to arrange an appearance. Jennifer Rubin, if Beck were sitting here, he would say, I don't need the approval of the elite media, Washington Post, former White House guy. I'm talking to the people. I'm saying things they want to hear. When I have a rally on the mall, 100,000 or more people show up. How would you respond to that?
Well, I suppose he can create a career any way he likes and he can carve out a niche, but as David pointed out, he is becoming less popular. I think once you set a bar for this sort of rhetoric, you have to keep overdoing it and overdoing it, because after a while, you've done that last week, you have to be crazier the next week. And I think does reach a point of diminishing returns for him. I would also say, frankly, that he doesn't need our approval, and we're not giving him our approval, but to the extent to which he wants to influence events, which is presumably why he does it, other than the money, of course, that he should seek to be a part of the conversation as opposed to be a circus act, which is what he's become.
Let me just jump in with some numbers, and then you can say what you want. When we say less popular, I mean, his ratings for the Fox News show are down 39% this past January versus a year earlier. But he's still drawing 1.75 million viewers, which is phenomenal at 5 p.m. So somebody likes the guy.
Somebody likes him. But it's worth remembering, when the biggest show on cable news has its biggest audience, there are 295 million Americans who are not watching it.
Sure.
So this is inherently an elite game. That the 5 million people who watch cable news are the political nation, the people who really care. But of
course, there's also talk radio, though some stations have been dropping big.
It's the same, by the way, it's the same 5 million people. It's a total stunt for people in that top 5 million to say, we represent the great and good American majority, the 295 million people who don't watch any of this. They don't. They're aberrant, too. So now, within the world of the political elite, to which everyone who watches that show belongs, within that world, it is important to have accurate information, not pretend information, to have real solutions, not fake solutions, and to have intelligent analysis, not phony, paranoid conspiracy crap.
What about Jennifer's point about having to be more outrageous each week to maintain your following? I mean, here we have a guy who once said President Obama had a deep-seated hatred of white people. I did not hear people on the right denouncing that. He eventually said he regretted it. But lately he's been talking about the Middle East Caliphate and Reform Judaism.